You know that person who goes completely quiet the moment something hurts them. The one who stops replying, stops explaining, stops trying to convince anyone they're okay. And when someone finally notices and asks what's wrong, they just say, I'm fine, but they're not. And deep down, you already know that. Most people look at that silence and misunderstand it. They think it means distance or coldness, or that the person just doesn't care anymore. But silence like that is rarely a choice. It's a response. Something happening inside the nervous system before words even become possible. And once you understand that, you start to see people differently, because some of the quietest people are not the least emotional. They're the most overwhelmed, and everything they feel is happening beneath the surface. Let's understand why. So, why does this happen? Why do some people become completely silent while others immediately say exactly how they feel? Most people assume it's simply personality. They think quiet people are naturally more reserved, or that they don't know how to communicate. But psychology tells a very different story. For many people, that silence isn't a personality trait at all. It's a protective response. The mind has recognized something as emotionally painful. And before you've even had time to understand what you're feeling, it begins pulling your attention inward. Not to push other people away, but to give you space to make sense of what's happening inside. And that's the part most people never see. Because while the outside becomes quieter, the inside becomes louder. And understanding why that happens starts with something your nervous system has been doing all along. So, what is actually happening in that moment? Why does it suddenly feel so difficult to speak, even when you want to? The answer has less to do with personality and far more to do with your nervous system. Most people have heard of the fight or flight response, but there's another response that receives far less attention. It's called freeze. When your brain senses emotional danger that feels too overwhelming to deal with immediately, it doesn't always prepare you to fight, and it doesn't always tell you to run. Sometimes it tells you to stay completely still, not because you've given up, but because your mind is buying itself time. Time to understand what's happened, time to process what you are feeling, and time to stop you from reacting before you're ready. From the outside, that looks like silence, but on the inside, your brain is working harder than ever. And once you understand that, everything starts to make a little more sense. Have you ever noticed that the harder someone pushes you to explain what's wrong, the harder it becomes to find the words? It feels frustrating, not just for the other person, but for you too, because it's not that you don't know something is wrong. You can feel it, you just can't explain it yet. And there's a reason for that. When we're emotionally overwhelmed, the brain doesn't focus on finding the perfect words. Its first priority is keeping us safe. That means the parts of the brain responsible for organizing thoughts and putting feelings into language become much harder to access. It's almost as if your mind is saying, not yet. First, let's make sense of this. So when someone says, just tell me what's wrong, it isn't always that you won't answer. Sometimes you genuinely can't, not until your mind has caught up with your emotions. This response didn't appear out of nowhere. It wasn't something you were born with. You weren't always like this. If you go far enough back, you'll remember a different version of yourself, one that spoke more freely, one that expressed things without thinking twice. But something changed along the way. Maybe you were interrupted when you tried to explain yourself. Maybe your feelings were dismissed. Maybe you were told you were too much, or overreacting, or that it wasn't a big deal. And slowly, your brain started to learn something important, not consciously, but quietly, that speaking up didn't always lead to understanding. So instead, you adapted. You became quieter, not because you stopped feeling things, but because expressing them didn't feel safe anymore. And over time, silence stopped being a reaction. It became a habit. And over time, your mind began to build patterns, not ideas you consciously chose, but lessons it quietly stored. It started linking emotional expression with outcomes. When you spoke up, what usually happened next? Were you understood or were you dismissed? Were you met with patience or frustration? Your brain doesn't just remember events, it remembers what those events meant for your safety. So if opening up repeatedly led to discomfort or misunderstanding or emotional distance, then your system adapted accordingly. It began to treat silence as the safer option, not because connection wasn't needed, but because it felt less risky than expression. And this is where something important forms. Not a personality trait, but a pattern, a way of navigating people based on what once felt emotionally safe. And that pattern doesn't disappear just because you grow older. And when you finally go quiet, something else begins happening underneath that silence. It's not emptiness, it's the opposite. Your mind starts working faster, not on speaking, but on understanding. You begin replaying what just happened, what was said, what was meant, what you might have missed. Every detail gets examined from different angles. Did I overreact? Did I misunderstand them? Did I say something wrong? And the more you think, the less clear everything becomes. Because you're not just feeling the moment, you're analyzing it, trying to make sense of it before responding to it. And in that process, words don't disappear because you have nothing to say. They disappear because there are too many possible things to say, and none of them feel certain enough yet. So you stay quiet. Not because the mind is empty, but because it's full. For someone who processes emotions this way, speaking immediately doesn't always feel honest, because in the middle of emotional pain, it's difficult to know exactly what you're feeling. And you know that. That's why you wait. Not because you don't care, not because you're trying to avoid the conversation, but because you don't want your first reaction to become your final answer. You'd rather say nothing than say something you'll regret 5 minutes later. So while other people are looking for an immediate response, you're looking for clarity. You want your words to reflect what you truly feel, not just what you felt in the heat of the moment. And although that silence can be frustrating for the people around you, it's often your way of protecting the relationship until you're ready to speak with honesty instead of emotion. The difficult part is most people don't understand any of this. They see your silence and they immediately want to fix it. They ask questions, they push for answers. Sometimes they even become frustrated because they mistake your quiet for rejection. But the more pressure you feel, the further inward your mind retreats. Not because you're trying to shut someone out, but because your nervous system still hasn't found a sense of safety. You can't rush emotional processing. It doesn't work on someone else's timetable. The harder someone pushes, the more your mind feels the need to protect itself. And what began as a moment of quiet reflection can quickly become complete emotional withdrawal. Not because you wanted distance, but because in that moment, distance feels safer than being misunderstood. So what actually helps? If pressure makes someone retreat, what allows them to come back? The answer is surprisingly simple: safety. Not the kind that protects you from physical danger, but the kind that tells your mind, it's okay now. You don't have to defend yourself anymore. When someone feels genuinely heard, without being rushed, without being judged, without feeling like they have to explain everything perfectly, something begins to change. The nervous system slowly relaxes, thoughts become clearer, words become easier to find, not all at once, but little by little. Because trust isn't built by forcing someone to speak. It's built by creating an environment where silence no longer feels necessary. And that's when real conversation can finally begin. By now, you've probably realized something. Your silence was never the problem. It was simply misunderstood. Because while other people assumed you had nothing to say, your mind was doing something very different. It was slowing down, sorting through thoughts, separating emotion from truth, making sure that when you finally spoke, your words reflected what you genuinely believed, not just what you happened to feel in a painful moment. And that's something many people never learn to do. Your silence isn't the absence of emotion, it's evidence that your emotions matter enough to deserve careful thought. You don't speak less because you feel less. You speak less because you want your words to carry meaning. And when they finally do, they usually carry far more weight than people ever expected. So what does all of this really mean? It means your silence wasn't random. It wasn't weakness. And it certainly wasn't proof that you cared any less than everyone else. It was a way of protecting yourself, using the only strategy your mind believed would keep you safe. And for a long time, it probably did. But healing doesn't mean forcing yourself to become the loudest person in the room. It doesn't mean saying everything the moment you feel it. It means slowly discovering that not every conversation ends the way the old ones did. That not every person will dismiss your feelings. Not every disagreement becomes rejection. And not every moment of vulnerability leads to regret. Little by little, your nervous system begins to learn something new. That safety can exist in connection, not just in silence. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll find yourself speaking a little sooner, explaining a little more, trusting a little deeper, not because someone demanded it from you, but because for the first time, it genuinely feels safe. If this video helped you understand yourself or someone you care about, consider subscribing. Because sometimes, understanding ourselves is the first step toward changing the story we've been living for years. And if that's the journey you're on, I'd love to help you take the next step